many classes and methods in those classes already predefined by the time you start writing your own code. And of course we have an example of a string, which is of course a predefined class in Java language package. And we also have the output string object, which is predefined inside the system class. So library is collection of packages. Package is typically containing other packages and classes in them. Class contains methods, including constructors, and method is a set of instructions. Well, there are some additional things to know. For example, classes can be declared inside classes, and that would be referred to as nested classes. Sometimes this technique is useful when you work with different existing frameworks of classes. So for instance, when you're using graphical user interface, there's a complex combination of different classes for different purposes, and sometimes declaring classes within classes just makes sense in that kind of programming. In addition to this, if you declare a class inside a method, that class cannot be used outside of the method and becomes completely internalized by that method. Alright, so these are just general ideas about the organization of the code that is possible within Java. And speaking of predefined classes, of course, everything that comes with the package name Java language is imported automatically. So of course method parameters can be primitive data types as well as references to objects, and we have an example of it right here. Constructor that takes the code, which is the primitive data type, and description, which is a string, which is of course an object reference. So it should be noted that the way the primitive data types and object references are passed to methods as parameters in different ways. So we'll take this example right here when we're constructing this widget with integer 123 and the string widget. So of course what is happening in this main method is that we construct a temporary variable that is initialized with the value 123, and we also construct a string which contains this text widget. So this is a primitive value and this is an object in memory, and both are passed over to this constructor, which is a method. So the value of 123 is physically copied over here. So this code is actually initialized with the value 123. Okay, so this contains 123 and it is a copy of the original value, which means that we can actually modify it inside this method. We can change it to something different. At the same time, this description is a reference, and this reference does not duplicate this original string. It actually is just a reference to this string. Okay, so that's the difference. Whereas the primitive value is copied, physical copy is made, and with objects such as string, a reference is created that contains address of the original object, not duplicating this. And finally, when this reference gets stored over in this object reference also refers to the same string. Okay, so this is how Java works with references. Basically, object references behaving differently, right? And with the primitive data type, this value 123 is stored one more time. So when this object is constructed, so this value 123 is duplicated one more time, so it gets stored inside the object as a separate value. And of course the description still refers to the same string in memory. So the string is allocated only once, and everywhere else so far as we have written in our class widget, we're just duplicating this reference to access the same instance of a variable or a string object in our case. So class string is type, of course, it's an object type, so we get access to our string through the string references. You can create strings dynamically, or you can just declare strings anonymously without the new operator, but it's similar to allocating a new string. So what is the difference here? Just a quick overview. The difference between the two syntaxes. So we have, let's just change the size of this a little larger. And so what should be noted here is that typically you use string literal like this with only double quotes without the new, which shortens the syntax. Of course, this object gets allocated with this text inside computer memory somewhere in Java Virtual Machine, and we have this string. And if we use the same string literal multiple times in our code, what you would be expecting from your Java compiler is that this object will not be duplicated. Every time you use the string literal in other places in our code, it will be just accessing the same string that already exists. However, if you decided to use the new operator like this with the string, every time you say new, a new instance will be allocated. So the first time there will be an object like this with the text Freddy Krueger in it, and this will be our name will be initialized with this like this. But if we repeat the same line of code over here, right? If we copy and paste it somewhere else, and then somewhere else, and we just repeat this entire string multiple times in our code, every time, because it has new and new, the new instance of the object will be physically allocated in memory. So, of course, unless you know what you're doing and why you're doing this, right? Every time you use new with string, new instance will be allocated, even though it's using the same string literal to initialize the object. So, most likely, the second way, basically doing this, is a preferred way, because every time you may be using this string literal multiple times in your code, and you probably don't want to create new string object every time. So this is a preferred way, but you need to understand the difference between this type of string creation and this type of string creation.